Our next section that we will be covering is how to create an intervention plan for a group of students with similar intervention needs. If you're not on the early warning system page, that is where I will begin this part of the demonstration and training. Again, remember that at first you can just watch me as I will be creating an intervention plan for a group of students with similar needs. And then I will go back and create a plan, and we'll do that together, you and I together. So at first, just sit back and watch the process, and then we'll create one together. One thing I wanted to mention before we create an intervention plan is you might notice that there is a button here that says Manage Class Staff. You won't use this button very often, if at all, but the purpose is to allow you to add a person as a member to your plans. Typically, this is only done when a teacher is going to be leaving a school. This allows plans to remain in place and associated with someone else until someone new takes over the class. But I mention that because there's typically someone who's curious and wants to know what the different buttons mean. And you will also notice that there is a prioritize button. It's up to you whether you use it. When it's activated, you will see that when you select students for an intervention plan, they will show up at the top of the student roster. It's a personal choice whether you use it or not. It has no impact in the way intervention plans are created. So for example, if I click on prioritize, and then I click on James's name here, it's going to go to the top of the list. See how it bumped up to the top of the list? And if I click Ivan, it will bump up. So again, it's just personal preference if you like for that to occur. And so I mentioned that as well so that you understand what that button means. So we're going to go ahead now and create an intervention plan for a group of students. The process that I'm going to show you is the same for creating an academic plan. So if you are working with students in grades 9 through 12 and you want to create an academic plan, or if you want to create a literacy plan or a math plan for students in grades kindergarten through 8th grade, or if you want to create a behavior plan for any student in grades K through 12, the process is the same regardless of the general area of need. So what you're going to do is you are going to select your students that you will be creating a plan for by clicking next to their names. And once you click next to their names, their name will become highlighted. And again, you can create a intervention plan for a group of students from a homeroom list, from an ad hoc group. It's all the same process. So once I have identified the students for which they have similar needs and would benefit from the same intervention, I highlight their names, and now I have a Create Plan button, which is over here on the right-hand side. And that button is not activated until I select my students. So prior to selecting students, you'll notice that that button is not activated. But once I select students, then that button becomes activated. I click on Create Plan. Once I do that, it's going to ask me what general area of need do I want to create a plan for. And you can see these are my choices. So I'm going to choose literacy for today's example. It's going to ask me to select the level of support that the students I've identified. What level of support do those students need? Remember, I'd be using some of my early warning system data to make that decision, or the team would be making that decision. The next thing it's asking you to do is to identify by marking yes that you have worked through the problem-solving process and that the team has analyzed the data, identified a specific problem, the team has created a hypothesis, the team has examined the instruction, curriculum, and environment, and they have identified an implementation plan with fidelity. Once you can say that you have done that, you click yes, and then you identify a justification for creating a plan for this group of students. And if this is their first plan, you would identify the student needs additional support. If a student's perhaps had a supplemental plan and now they need an intensive intervention plan, then you might also say it needs additional support. If a group of students were receiving an intensive support and now they're going to receive a supplemental support, you may say student needs less support. So those are pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to say the students are in need of additional support. And then please enter any specific notes about the change in intervention intensity for these students. But just remember, do not use student names here. So you would include any additional information here. And that's not required, but it's there for the purposes of being able to add additional information when necessary. Save that information. Next is going to ask you to identify the specific area of need for this plan. So you have choices of these 3 different specific areas of need within the area of literacy. And I'm going to go ahead and say that these students are in need of vocabulary and comprehension. I identify that by clicking there. And you can see that you may choose 2 specific areas of need, but not more than 2. The next thing it's going to ask is that you consider instructional practices. And you need to expand this section by clicking on the plus symbol on the left-hand side here. And then you need to identify that you have considered these 3 areas: instruction, curriculum, and environment. And you do that by clicking in those boxes. And then you are going to identify the date in which the intervention will begin. It defaults to the date that you are creating the intervention plan. You can choose another date if you so choose to. I'm just going to use today's date. And then you click on Save Date. And once you click on Save Date, it expands the intervention section and allows you to choose the intervention or interventions, no more than 2, that you will be using to work with these students. I'm going to just say sample intervention, and you're going to do that by clicking in the add box. Once I do that, I have the opportunity to add any additional information here that I might want to include here regarding the intervention. It's not required, but available to add additional information about that intervention. But you must include the frequency, how often the students will receive the intervention, for how many minutes the intervention will be provided, and the person or persons responsible. So you can see it defaults to myself. I can add an additional person if I like being responsible. And just keep in mind that whoever is deemed responsible here, those are the individuals who are also able to log when an intervention occurs. And then you will identify the group size. Next, you're going to identify your progress monitoring method. So what progress monitoring method will be used to monitor how the students are responding to the interventions. And I'll just pretend like I'm going to use iReady. and I need to set a target date. So I'm going to set a target date 4 weeks from now. And once I find my target date, I want to make sure I click on Set Target Date button. Once I do that, it will populate that information down here. Now I need to identify a baseline date for when these students were provided the iReady measurement. I'm going to pretend like they were provided the measurement on July 1st, and this student scored a 23. This student had it provided on the 1st also and scored a 22. And this student actually had their assessment on the 2nd and scored a 26. And then I'll identify a target score for these 3 students. It can either be the same score or a different score, that it doesn't matter. And then I'm also able to identify if a student or if all the students happen to be working off grade level. So if my progress monitoring is off grade level, I would want to indicate that by checking these boxes here as applicable. And then when I get to the bottom of the page, I'm going to have a finalize plan button. If for some reason you don't have a finalize plan button at the bottom of the page, that indicates that you forgot to complete something on the page, and you would need to scroll back up and complete whatever it was that you may have forgotten to include. Click on Finalize Plan. And you have a finalized plan for 3 students. So it shows me the intervention. It tells me how often the student will receive it, for how many minutes, who's responsible, and the group size. And then each student has their own graphical representation of their baseline score and target score. And each student has their own what we call action buttons, which I'll be going over after a bit. But you can see that each student has their own information. And if for some reason you get to the end of your plan and you realize that you may have made a mistake, perhaps you said instead of 3 times a week, you accidentally put in 2 times a week, you can modify the plan by clicking on Modify Plan. And this allows you to go up on the plan and make any changes that you might want. So even if you accidentally said there was 4 students in the group and you really wanted to say there was 3, you can make that modification and then come back down to the bottom of the page and finalize your plan. But that's how easy it is to create an intervention plan for a group of students. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and walk through that process with you since it's we do time. So I'm going to click on the Early Warning System tab. It's asking me if I want to leave this page, and I do. And I'm going to go ahead and just pause a moment and make sure that all of you are on the Early Warning System page. So if all of you will just click on the Early Warning System tab, we're going to create an intervention plan together. So if you'll recall, the 2 things that I went over first was this Manage Class Staff button, which you will very seldom use. But just remember it's there in the event that you have a teacher who's going to be leaving a school and you want to add an additional person to be associated with these plans so that when that person takes over, the plans will still be associated with that person. And then the prioritize button, remember, was just whether or not you want the students to come to the top of the list when you select them. So if you want that to happen, you click on prioritize. So click on this prioritize button and then click on a name and you'll see it jump to the top of the page. And again, that's just a preference whether you want that on or not. So I'm going to go ahead and remove prioritize for mine, but you can keep yours on if you like. It's personal preference. So let's go ahead and create an intervention plan for a group of students. Select 3 students from your list, any 3 students, by clicking next to their names. Don't click directly on their names. Click next to their names, and that will highlight the rows. Once you do that, click on the Create Plan button. The Create Plan button is up in that navy ribbon. Click Create Plan. Once you do that, choose one of these general areas of need. I'm going to choose math this time. Now it's going to ask you to select the level of support, supplemental or intensive. Select either one. Now it's asking you to mark that the team has analyzed the data, identified a specific problem, created a hypothesis, examined the instruction, curriculum, and environment, and implemented the plan with fidelity. And once you can say that that has occurred, that the problem-solving process has been reviewed, you click yes. Next, you're going to click on this drop-down arrow under justification and either choose student needs additional support or students need less support. And then if you have any pertinent notes that you want included here that are relative to the change in intervention intensity for these students, you would include them here. But you would not include any names of students in this section. Next, click Save and Continue. Now it's asking for you to choose the specific area of need that you're going to work on with these students. You may choose 1 or 2, but not more than 2. I'm choosing 1. And then click Save and Continue. Now we're going to look at the instructional practices section here. In order to do that, I need to expand it by clicking on the plus symbol. So see this plus symbol where my cursor is? Go ahead and click on that. And that opens this up, and it's asking you to click on each of these areas. And by doing so, you're indicating that you have thoroughly considered each of these areas. Next, it's asking when the intervention will begin. Again, it defaults to today's date, or you can click in the box and it will pull up a calendar if you want to choose a different date. I'm going to use today's date. So click on Save Date. Now it opens up intervention choices to choose from. So you will choose the intervention that's appropriate for the students in this group. And you just click in the box in the Add column, and that shows the intervention. You can add any additional information here. And that is, up to you, not required. Frequency is required. So how often are these students going to receive this intervention? And for how many minutes? And who's responsible for providing the intervention? You'll want to have your name as one of the persons responsible so you can log that the interventions occurred. You could add an additional person as well. And you want to identify the group size. Scroll down a little bit and you will have progress monitoring tools to choose from. So what progress monitoring method are you going to use? to identify whether or not the student's having a good response to the intervention, you'll click on the one that you want to choose by clicking in the box. And then you're going to set a target date. So you'll set a date in which you expect the student to meet the score that you're going to be identifying. Once you choose that date, be sure to click Set Target Date, the Set Target Date button. If you don't do that, you won't be able to finalize your plan. So click on Set Target Date. And once you do that, it will populate this column right here, the Target Date column. Now you're going to choose a baseline date. This will be a time that either today's date or a previous date. So again, I'm going to pretend like I gave a progress monitoring on July 1st, and I'm going to input a score, a baseline score for this student. I'll choose a baseline date and score for this student, and a baseline date and score for this student. And then I'm going to identify a target score for each of my students, which can be the same score or different scores. And then if any one of the students in my group is working off grade level in terms of progress monitoring, I would identify that by clicking in the box. And if I scroll down to the bottom of the page, I should have a Finalize Plan button. If for some reason you do not have a Finalize Plan button, please scroll up and see what you may have missed. It may be that you forgot to set your target date button. Click on that button. It may be that you forgot to include your group size or your frequency or duration. It may be that you forgot to check one of these important instructional practice areas. So go through and make sure that you have all of that done, and you should have a Finalize Plan button, and then click Finalize Plan. Once you do that, you will scroll up to the top of the page and you will see your intervention, the frequency, duration, persons responsible, group size. You'll see each student has their own graph. If you scroll down. And remember, if you made any mistakes to your intervention plan, you can always click on the Modify Plan button here and make your changes and then finalize your plan again. But that is the process for creating an intervention plan. I am now going to stop and allow you 5 minutes or so to create an intervention plan, and then we'll take questions and answers. So you will want to click on the Early Warning System tab, which will take you back to your Early Warning System page, and then you can create an intervention plan.